No one ever questioned Bran's silence. After everything, the war, the Night King, the fall of kings and queens, they just accepted it, thought he was wise, thought the silence was peace, but they never asked what really brewed behind those still eyes. He sat in his chair, always watching, always listening. And the truth was, Bran had stopped being just Bran the moment he touched that weirwood tree. He had become something else, something older, something colder. The three-eyed Raven, they called him, but no one asked what the Raven wanted. The truth. It wanted everything. He watched them fight their wars. Let Daenerys burn King's Landing to ash. Let Jon Snow murder her in cold silence. Let Arya, his own sister, ride off into whatever unknown she chased. Every piece of the game. Moved, but not on its own. Bran had nudged them quietly, gently, so no one noticed. He saw all their choices before they made them. He planted the seeds with small whispers, strange looks, eerie timing, and they all played their parts. Tyrion thought he was choosing Bran because he was wise, because he had a story. But that was the brilliance of it. Bran didn't have a story, not one anyone really knew. That made him safe, mysterious. A blank page they could write their hopes onto. Tyrion, the broken drunk clinging to purpose, never even noticed he was doing exactly what Bran had wanted him to do. "Why do you think I came all this way?" Bran had said with a half-smile when they offered him the throne. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't sarcasm. It was truth. He had seen this moment years ago, long before the walls of Winterfell cracked, under snow and fire. Long before Jon Snow was even named Aegon Targaryen, Bran had seen how the board would clear itself of the old players, how the powerful would fall by their own pride, their mercy, their madness. And he had done nothing to stop it, because power was never given. It was claimed one silent piece at a time. Sansa thought she was free in the north, a queen in the snow. But Bran had known what she would want, what she would need, and gave it to her. Let her feel powerful, let her feel safe. But she still knelt to him in the end. She still called him Your Grace. And that was enough. Jon had gone to the wall, exiled by the very council that thought they were making peace. But Bran had seen Jon's exile, had planned it. He knew Jon would kill Daenerys. He had watched her madness unfold and never once lifted a finger to warn anyone. He needed her to fall. He needed Jon to do it. He needed the last Targaryen to remove the last threat to the realm and then disappear. One by one his enemies vanished, not through war, not through fire, but through carefully guided events that all seemed to happen naturally. And no one ever looked at Bran, because who would suspect a crippled boy in a chair? But behind those glassy eyes, something else watched, something ancient, something that had learned the cost of interference from the old three-eyed Raven. Bran had watched the world for years before making his first real move, and when he finally acted, the realm burned, and he was all that remained. They thought they were rebuilding. Tyrion walked through the red chambers of the broken Red Keep, chalk dust clinging to his boots, muttering about politics and city plans. Brienne stood by the barracks, helping train boys too young to know the taste of blood. Davos handled the grain shipments. Sam buried his head in books, now Grand Maester. They were fixing things, rebuilding walls, laws, lives. But Bran knew better. The realm wasn't being rebuilt. It was being reshaped quietly, subtly, and he was the sculptor. The council met once every fortnight. Each time they arrived with parchments and scrolls and loud ideas. Tyrion would speak first, as if anyone else's voice mattered. Bran would sit in silence, watching, always watching. His eyes didn't just look at men, they looked through them, into their fears, into their guilt. And each one of them carried guilt. Tyrion for betraying Varys and killing thousands through poor choices. Brienne for failing to protect her king and for loving a man who never deserved her. Sam for surviving, when others died better deaths. Davos for years spent smuggling lies into noble rooms. Bran didn't judge them, he used them. A glance here, a quiet word there. They left every council meeting thinking their ideas were theirs, but they never were. Not truly. Because Bran had already seen what they would decide. And if their choices drifted from his vision, he nudged. A small change in tone. A single, Sentence like, "Is that what you really believe?" spoken in that cold, distant voice that made even hardened warriors second-guess themselves. No one saw the manipulation. It was too quiet, too calm, and that was the genius. He let them bicker about ships and roads and taxes, let them feel like kings without crowns, but every real decision, every true turn of power, he already foresaw. And if he saw a future he didn't like, he simply waited until that thread of time unraveled itself, as all fragile plans did. He didn't rule by sword, he ruled by inevitability. In the north, ravens circled Winterfell more than usual. Sansa had started to notice. She wrote letters questioning Bran's silence, asking why he hadn't visited. He responded with short answers, hollow as the crypts below their home. She wasn't stupid. She was beginning to suspect something, but that too he had seen. He knew Sansa's ambition was a flame, not a torch. It burned high, but brief. Eventually, it would snuff itself out, probably through her pride or through her trusting the wrong ally. Bran didn't need to confront her, he just needed to wait. In the east, reports came from Braavos and beyond. The Iron Bank had started to inquire about the throne's growing debts. They sent envoys. One died mysteriously in Old Town. Another ship sank crossing Blackwater Bay, weather, they said. But Bran had already warned the sea before they even left, and Arya, free, wild Arya, sailing west past all known maps. That had been his last gift, a goodbye without goodbye. She was too much like Jon, too unpredictable, too dangerous. She had to be elsewhere, and so she was. Jon, exiled to the cold north, rode past the wall with Ghost and a band of wildlings, who still remembered his name. He thought he was free, but freedom was just another cage cleverly designed. Bran had left no threats behind. Every person with ambition was either under his eye or out of reach. Every voice of rebellion had been given what it wanted, power, purpose, or peace. But peace was the most dangerous lie of all, because it made them stop looking. Made them stop asking why the boy in the chair had let their world collapse. Why he had said nothing as kings fell, dragons died, cities burned. Why he had let so many innocents die. They didn't ask, because they didn't want to know. And Bran? He didn't need their questions. He already had their answers. Far beyond the walls of the Red Keep, whispers had begun. They started small, like all dangerous things. A merchant in Dawn muttering over spiced wine. A scepter in the Reach who dreamed of fire, and a boy without a soul. A blacksmith in the Vale who swore his cousin saw a raven with human eyes. Silly things forgotten by morning. But whispers had a way of growing teeth. And the strange thing was, they never spoke Bran's name. Not exactly. They called him the boy who watches, the one who sees, the king who speaks to shadows, superstition they called it. But even superstition comes from somewhere. In the shadows of the new realm, fear had started to bloom. Back in King's Landing, Bran didn't flinch. He knew these whispers were coming. Had seen them coming, but they didn't bother him. They served a purpose. Fear always did. The last rulers had burned cities and cut throats in daylight. He didn't need to do any of that. Fear of the unknown, of what he might do, was far more powerful than any sword. Besides, the real war had never been with swords. It was with truth, and truth. Bran could twist it like a branch in winter. Varys had once whispered secrets through the realm, his little birds fluttering through the halls of power. But Varys was dead now, burned alive for treason. And Bran hadn't mourned him. He had, in fact, let it happen, had seen it, long before the flames touched his skin. He knew Varys would challenge Daenerys. He needed him to. Because for Daenerys to fall, someone had to light the fire. And Jon, poor broken Jon, he still believed he did the right thing. Still saw himself as a man cursed by duty. That guilt sat heavy on him as he wandered the frozen lands beyond the wall, thinking himself a ghost. Bran had made sure no letters reached him. No word of the realm, no rumors, no whispers. Just snow. Just silence. Let him fade into myth. Let the world forget he ever had a claim. One night, during a council meeting, Tyrion paused in the middle of a sentence. "Your Grace," he said, his eyes narrowed, "sometimes I wonder, With all you've seen, all you know, did you want Daenerys to burn the city?" The room went still. Even Brienne stopped sipping her tea. Davos coughed uncomfortably. Sam blinked. Bran turned his head slow and smooth, like a bird tilting to inspect prey. "I saw what would happen if I tried to stop her," he said quietly. "And I saw what would happen if I didn't." Tyrion's mouth opened slightly. "And you chosen this?" "I chose the best path for the realm." There was no argument after that. What could they say? What could they do? They believed he saw fate, that he was fate, and maybe he was. Later that night, Tyrion drank alone in the Tower of the Hand. He poured wine until it soaked into the stone floor. He whispered things to himself he wouldn't dare say aloud. He let it all happen. But Tyrion also knew, too late, too helpless, that the throne had never really belonged to any of them. Not Robert, not Cersei, not even Daenerys. They were pawns in a game none of them understood. Bran didn't win the Game of Thrones. He rewrote the rules, and in the dark, when no one else listened, the old gods whispered their approval, because even gods feared the boy who could see them. Far. In the north, past the ruins of shattered castles and bones buried beneath snowdrifts, Jon Snow felt it. He wouldn't speak it aloud, not to Tormund, not to the wildlings, but there was something wrong with the wind. The way it moved, the way it watched. The forest no longer whispered like it used to, it listened now. Always listening. Jon had seen many strange things beyond the wall. Wights, giants, children of the forest. But nothing unnerved him like the feeling that someone somewhere was always watching. Sometimes late at night when the fire burned low and Ghost lay with one ear cocked toward the trees, Jon would dream. But they weren't dreams. They were visions. Bran's face, cold and pale, eyes milky like he had drowned in a lake. But he spoke, and when he did, his mouth didn't move. "You left your duty unfinished, Jon. You still owe the realm your blood." Jon would wake gasping, sweat freezing against his skin. He never told anyone, not even when the dreams returned again and again. Bran was in his mind. He knew it. Somehow his little brother, no, not his brother, not anymore, had crawled into his head and never left. Back in the south, Bran sat alone in the God's Wood of the Red Keep. The new tree they had planted hadn't taken root the same way it did in the north. It was pale, sickly. But Bran didn't care. He didn't need it. He didn't worship the old gods. He was the old gods now, or at least the piece of them that had learned how to wear a crown. He closed his eyes and the world opened. Birds in flight, mice beneath floorboards, rats chewing parchment in dusty vaults. He saw them all, and when he wanted to, he could go farther, into people. He visited Tyrion's dreams sometimes, watched what guilt did to him like a scientist watching rot spread through meat. Tyrion's mind was full of ghosts, Shay, Tywin, even Joffrey. Bran let them swirl. It made Tyrion easier to control. He watched Sansa from time to time, standing alone on the snowy battlements of Winterfell. Her thoughts were harder to read. Sansa had grown cunning, but even she couldn't shield herself forever. Eventually, she would slip. She was already starting to wonder why Bran never wrote, why he never visited, why the ravens from King's Landing no longer flew north. She had sent scouts once, quietly. Bran had seen them the moment they left. None returned. Then there was Arya, sailing west into the unknown. Bran didn't follow her, couldn't. Something out there blocked him. That troubled him. The sea had always been dangerous for magic, too wild, too deep, too old. He left her. To her fate, whatever it might be. But it wasn't Arya or Sansa or Jon that worried him. It was Sam. Samwell Tarly had been too quiet lately. He had gone deeper into the Citadel's vaults, reading books no one else dared open. Ancient tomes about greenseers and time, about forbidden magic, about men who saw too much. One scroll mentioned a seer king who tried to rule the world through dreams and was buried beneath the ice by the gods themselves. Bran had seen Sam reading it. He had tried to dismiss it. Sam was soft. Sam was loyal. Sam was afraid. But fear made men dangerous. One afternoon, Sam walked into the council chamber carrying a thick black book, bound in cracked leather. He placed it on the table. In front of Bran, without a word, the room was silent. Bran stared at the book, and for the first time in years, he blinked just once. Then he looked up and smiled. Sam didn't smile back. His hands trembled as they rested on the book's surface. He had wrapped it in linen for the journey from Old Town, but even now it seemed to hum beneath his fingers. A low, unsettling vibration, like something inside the pages, was still alive. "I wasn't going to bring this," Sam said quietly, not looking at Bran. "But I kept reading, and I couldn't stop." The others watched in silence. Tyrion leaned forward slightly, squinting at the faded sigil burned into the leather. A weirwood tree, its roots twisting into the shape of an eye. "I don't expect you to believe everything." "In there," Sam continued, "but the Citadel buried it for a reason. Pages were torn out, some rewritten, someone wanted it gone." Bran said nothing. He just kept smiling. Tyrion cleared his throat. "What exactly is it, Sam?" Sam glanced around the room, then swallowed hard. "It's a record, a warning. From before Valyria, before the first men even crossed the land bridge, there was a man, or something like a man, a seer. He could see time the way we see distance. Past, future, all of it. People thought he was a god." Brienne frowned. "What happened to him?" He stopped speaking, just watched. He began to influence, whisper in the minds of kings, cause wars with dreams. People bowed to him without knowing why. They feared him, but they couldn't stop following him. He knew too much. Too many secrets. Sam paused, staring into Bran's blank eyes. And eventually, the world turned on him. The old gods cursed his name. They buried him in a prison of ice, far in the north. Said he'd return in another form, when the world was weak and full of chaos. The council sat still. A cold draught slipped through the open windows, stirring the edges of the ancient pages. Bran didn't blink. "Sounds like a bedtime story," Davos muttered, though his voice held no humor. "Does it?" Sam asked, eyes still locked on Bran. "Because there's more." He opened the book, turning pages slowly. One passage had been underlined in ink, smudged and faded. "The seer will not need to act. He will only need to know. And through knowing, he will bend men like reeds in the wind." Brienne shifted uncomfortably. Tyrion's wine remained untouched. Bran finally spoke, his voice as calm as a winter lake. "And what do you want from this, Sam?" "From me?" "I want the truth," Sam whispered. "Did you let her burn the city? Did you know Jon would kill her? Did you see all of it and just sit there?" The room held its breath. Bran's smile faded. "I did what the realm needed," he said. "The fire had to come, the blood had to spill. You know what happens when tyrants live too long." "You're not answering the question," Tyrion said, voice low. Bran looked at him. "You already know the answer." Tyrion's fingers twitched. Sam's voice shook now. "Are you him? The one from the book?" Bran's head tilted. "Does it matter?" Outside the window, the wind howled suddenly, sharp, like a scream caught in the throat of the sky. Brienne stood slowly, her hand brushing her, sword's hilt. "Your Grace, with all due respect, we deserve to know who sits on that throne." Bran turned to her, and for the first time, something behind those eyes moved. Not light, not tears. Something else. Something too big for a boy, too cold for a man. "I am not who I was," he said, "and neither is the world. You call me king, but I am only a reflection, a necessary echo." He placed one pale hand on the open book, and the ink beneath his palm began to bleed, letters melting into black liquid, running like veins across the parchment. Sam stumbled back. The council erupted into chaos. Brienne reached for her sword. Davos swore. Tyrion stood, knocking over his chair, but Bran remained still, eyes now glowing faintly white. "You wanted truth," he said, and the walls of the chamber began to darken, not with shadow, but with roots. Tiny, crimson-tipped tendrils, snaking from the floor, the ceiling, the cracks in the stone. "Then see it." The chamber twisted, not physically at first, but in perception. The air itself thickened, pressing against their lungs like wet wool. Light dimmed unnaturally, flickering even though there were no flames. Brienne stepped back, sword half drawn, her knuckles pale with strain. Davos muttered prayers beneath his breath, old ones he barely remembered. Tyrion just stared. And Sam, poor Sam, collapsed to his knees, the ancient book sliding from his grip as black veins bloomed across its cover like rot. Bran didn't move. His hands rested on the arms of his throne, fingers curled like talons, his eyes glowing, with a dull white sheen flicked to each of them in turn, not with anger, not with fear, with indifference, like a god staring at insects, wondering why they buzzed so loudly. "You've all asked questions," Bran said, but his voice came from nowhere. It echoed inside their skulls, inside the marrow of their bones. "So let me show you the answers." And then everything broke. Their minds weren't in the room anymore, not really. Each of them was pulled violently, separated, divided, scattered like ravens startled into flight. Tyrion stood in the throne room, but it was burning again. He saw Daenerys standing over ash and bone, her eyes wide, her expression triumphant. He turned and saw himself whispering to Jon, heard his own voice. "Sometimes duty is the death of love." And behind them, in the shadows, Bran, watching, always watching. Brienne found herself in Winterfell, kneeling beside Jaime's body in the crypts. Only he wasn't dead. His eyes were open, crying. "You let me die," he whispered. "You knew what would happen." She turned and saw Bran silent beneath the weirwood tree, 1,000 ravens swirling overhead like a crown of thorns. Davos was back on the Blackwater, watching wildfire consume the sea. But the flames twisted, took shapes, faces, his sons, Shireen's, men who died in his service. And in the smoke, Bran's eyes opened. "This was always your path, the bite," smoke whispered. "You were always meant to deliver fire." And Sam saw too much. He saw the children of the forest, binding the first man to a tree, screaming as roots split his skin. He saw time bending around that tree like a serpent swallowing its own tail. He saw the first three-eyed raven whispering to mad kings, pushing thoughts into minds unready to hold them. And he saw Bran, not in a moment, but in all of them, watching kings rise and fall, watching wars begin and end, watching the wheel turn and turn again, until finally he became the spoke that could not be broken. When they returned, if you could call it returning, they gasped like drowning men dragged from water. Tyrion vomited on the floor. Brienne dropped her sword. Davos stared into nothing. Sam wept. Only Bran remained untouched, serene, cold, unchanged. "I gave you truth," he said. Tyrion wiped his mouth, shaking. "You manipulated everything, all of it. You let millions die." Bran didn't answer. "Why?" Brienne asked hoarsely. "Why let it happen this way?" Bran blinked slowly. "Because this is the only way it ever ends. The world does not need heroes. It needs order. It needs purpose." Sam stood on trembling legs. "You've become what the old gods feared. You've turned their gift into a cage." "I've turned chaos into silence," Bran replied. "Is that not mercy?" Brienne took a step forward. "You don't get to decide that." "No," Bran said quietly, "but I already have." The black veins spread across the chamber walls. The floor began to pulse, almost like it had a heartbeat. "You can still stop this," Sam said, desperate now, pleading. "Step down. Let people choose their own fate." Bran tilted his head. "I saw what they choose." And for the first time, Sam felt real fear, not the kind that made your heart race, but the kind that made it stop. Bran leaned forward in his throne. "Do you think I came all this way to give it back?" Panic took root. Brienne stepped in front of Sam, sword drawn now, fully steady despite the tremble in her shoulders. Davos edged toward the door, though part of him knew escape was a lie. Tyrion stayed frozen, the way a man does when he's seen the face of a god and found no soul behind it. The room wasn't the same anymore. The walls weren't stone. They looked like stone, but beneath them things moved. Roots, veins, memory itself. Bran wasn't just sitting on a throne. He was the throne. He had spread into it like rot in fruit, like ice creeping across glass. And it was too late to cut him out. "You said you didn't want anything," Tyrion said, his voice cracked and bitter. "You said you didn't want to rule." "I didn't," Bran replied, his tone as calm as still water. But I needed to. And what do you need now? Davos rasped. Bran turned to him and the world seemed to tilt. To finish the story, that's when the guards burst in. Steel cloaks, summoned by the noise, loyal to the crown. To his crown. They froze at the sight. Some dropped their weapons. One fled without a word. Others drew steel, confused but trained to obey. Brienne raised her sword higher. "Stay back!" she barked. But they didn't move. Bran gave no command. He didn't need to. One of the guards, young, barely older than a squire, turned his blade on the others. In a blur he sliced the throat of the man beside him. Another guard screamed, falling as steel drove into his chest. Blood sprayed across the chamber floor. Tyrion shouted. Davos reached for his dagger. Sam stumbled backward. The young man's eyes were white, the same white as Bran's. "By the gods," Brienne whispered. No one answered, because there were no gods here, only Bran. "I don't control minds," Bran said. "I only open the door. They choose to walk through." Two more guards turned, their faces slack, eyes blank. They moved like sleepwalkers. The rest fled in terror. Brienne lunged. She moved fast, blade aimed directly for Bran's chest. No hesitation, no mercy. If anything of her old friend remained, it was gone. But before the steel could land, it stopped mid-air, frozen. Not by a hand, not by magic, by time itself. Her breath caught in her throat. Her arms trembled, frozen in mid-swing. Sam screamed. Tyrion stumbled back against the wall. Davos muttered another prayer, but even his words slowed, dragged like stones through water. Bran stared straight at Brienne. "There's no killing me," he said softly, "because I am no longer a man you can kill." And then time resumed. Brienne flew backward, flung by some unseen force. Her sword clattered across the floor. Sam dropped to his knees again. Tyrion stepped forward. His voice was shaking, but he forced it out anyway. "Then what now? You rule forever? Become some kind of immortal tyrant hiding behind silence and birds?" "No," Bran said. "Not forever." He looked toward the window. "Just until the world forgets how to burn itself." Silence stretched, choking the room. And then Bran stood. Slowly, mechanically. He hadn't stood in years. But now, as if the throne had filled his veins with old magic and ancient spite, his legs moved. He walked down the steps and the roots followed. The sound of Bran's steps echoed like judgment through the broken chamber. Each footfall was slow, deliberate, wrong. His legs shouldn't move. His spine should have stayed broken. But as he descended from the throne, the truth sank in for everyone. Watching, this was no longer Bran Stark. It hadn't been for a long time. The man walking toward them now was something else, something that had worn Bran like a skin until the moment was right to shed the lie. The roots followed him like living chains, slithering across the floor, crawling up columns, drinking in the torchlight until the room dimmed into twilight. Tyrion backed against the wall, face pale as chalk. "What are you going to do to us?" Bran turned to him almost gently. "Nothing." Tyrion blinked, confused. "I don't need to kill you, Tyrion," Bran said. "I need you, just as I've always needed you. The world listens when you speak. That's what makes you useful." "You call this useful?" Tyrion spat, pointing to the blood-soaked floor, the possessed guards, the cursed book now rotting in Sam's hands. Bran nodded once. "Yes, pain is the only truth that sticks." Brienne was on her feet again, battered, blood trailing from her temple. Her sword was too far to reach. She stood between Bran and Sam, though she knew it wouldn't matter. Davos just whispered, "What are you, boy?" Bran turned to him. "A memory, a future, a bridge between order and chaos." Sam coughed, his voice raw. "You're a monster." "I'm a cure," Bran replied without emotion. Sam held up the book, now crumbling at the edges. "Then what do you fear? Why destroy this?" Bran tilted his head. "Because truth is not for everyone. Only the right minds can carry it." "And you decide who those are?" Tyrion asked bitterly. Bran looked at him. "I already have." The door behind them slammed open, but it wasn't soldiers this time. It was ravens, hundreds of them, black wings battering the air like a storm. They filled the chamber, circling Bran, perching on walls, on beams, on the twisted roots that now pulsed like veins of the keep. One landed on Bran's shoulder, another on his hand. He didn't flinch. He raised his eyes to the dome above them, to the broken sky beyond. "The world will change," he said, "not with fire, not with conquest, with knowing, with remembering." Tyrion tried to speak again, but his words failed him. Because now, Bran's voice was everywhere. Not just in the room, but outside. In the city, in the realm. Every raven that took flight carried his whispers. Every eye that looked to the sky would see him, not as a boy, but as a god, and they would obey. Outside, people screamed. They ran from the square, pointing to the sky, to the flocks, to the eyes in the wings, and soon the silence fell. Not because they were afraid, but because they began to understand. Visions, dreams, glimpses of a future they hadn't chosen, but suddenly accepted. The same way the council had, the same way the kings had, the same way Daenerys burned and Jon vanished and Arya sailed. Acceptance didn't need to be willing, it just had to be inevitable. In the ruins of the throne room, Brienne turned to Bran, her voice broke. "Was this always your plan?" Bran turned to her, his eyes fully white now, glowing like the moon. "No," he said, then he smiled. "It was always yours."